Good day, everyone. So my name is JD, and I will be your teacher or instructor for science, technology, and society. And as you know, we already are talking about the chapter 1 of our discussion on science, technology, and society, and that is history of science, technology, and society. We already talked about the introduction to history of science and technology. We also discussed certain chapters like the chapter 2, the alchemists, not wizards, the philosophers, the questions of the hows and whys of us, and the most recent is we already talked about the engineers, the architectons, the great builders, the artists. No, we already talked about them. Now we're entering the last chapter, the last lesson of chapter 1, and that is the scientist version 2.0. What does it take to be a scientist? To be a scientist? Paano ka nga ba mako-consider o kikilalaning scientist? Kailangan mo bang mag-take ng bachelor's, master's, and then PhD to be called a scientist? To win Nobel Prize, 10 Outstanding Young Scientists of the Philippines, or Nobel Prize or Newton Prize Award. Kailangan mo ba ng mga yon bago ka makilala bilang scientist? What is scientific method? Who are the people behind scientific method? Paano natin titingnan ang scientific method? Is it structured? Is it linear? Ganun ba ang konsepto ng scientific method? And lastly, why is science, or why science? Scientific method is not necessarily a step-by-step process that only follows one flow of direction to obtain conclusion. There is no single method in the pursuit of seeking scientific knowledge, but scientific method should possess basic principles of seeking knowledge: the rationality, experimentation, and ruthless examination. The development of scientific method is given credit to three great intellectuals who took part in the pursuit of knowledge. When you are talking about scientific method, always consider that it is not linear. Diba? In science, or even in the art of questioning or in the scientific inquiry, kapag nagtanong ka at nasagot ito, anong gagawin mo sunod? Diba? Magtatanong ka ulit mula sa sagot na nakuha mo. Ganon din ang scientific method. Once you start and identify the answer, once you question, and when you question, you try to seek the answer. And when you seek the answer, there are no singular way of finding answer. Hindi lang iisang paraan para mahanap mo ang sagot. Maraming paraan para mahanap mo ang sagot when you talk about science. Now, it is important that as people to be rational, to be questioning. But it is also observed that kapag nahanap mo na yung sagot, you are not contented and you tend to ask more questions. Therefore, scientific method is not linear. It's also circular. It branched out and it's restructured. Kasi maaaring yung sagot na makuha mo, magtanong ka ng 5 beses, 5 tanong mula dun sa isang sagot. A question that is answered can cause or can result to questioning more about it. Okay, so nabanggit kanina that the scientific method is given credit to 3 different people. Here are the 3 different people that are very important when you talk about or when it comes to scientific method. First is Galileo Galilei. Galileo Galilei is born in 1567. He is an Italian scientist who largely took part in cosmological understanding of the world viewed today. In 1609, he reinvented the telescope and used it as an instrument that changed astronomy today. Upon his observation of the universe using technology of telescope, he developed his support to the heliocentric view. Now, we will not be talking yet about his challenging pursuit in the promotion of heliocentrism. Tatalakayin natin yan sa susunod na chapter. when you talk about the cosmological understanding, kasi dati pinaniniwalaan ng mga tao ang Earth ang nasa gitna ng universe, no? But it's actually here in our solar system, it's actually the sun. Actually, it's not exactly the sun, but somewhere near the sun is the center of the solar system. At yun ang inumpisahan ni Galileo Galilei na i-challenge. Ngayon, I would like to break a misconception that Galileo Galilei invented telescope. Galileo Galilei did not invent the telescope. The telescope was invented in 1608, and it was a merchant, no, a Dutch merchant invented the telescope. Diba, telescope is a technology that tends to magnify certain object, the view of a certain object, diba? And in 1608, merong isang Dutch merchant na naka-imbento nitong telescope na to na kaya niyang i-magnify yung size ng material o ng object ng times 8, multiplied by 8. Ngayon, nung nalaman ito ni Galileo Galilei, he reinvented the telescope the following year, 1609. What do you mean by reinvented? He increased the magnification. Inangat niya ang magnification nito kasi hindi niya naman magamit yung magnification ng 8 sa stars o sa universe. Ang ginawa niyang times 15 hanggang ginawang times 30. That's why Galileo Galilei is the first person or the first scientist to use telescope in understanding the universe. He is not the first person to invent or to use the telescope, but he is the first person to reinvent the telescope and use telescope in understanding the universe. Cosmological understanding. Kasi yung mga nauna sa kanya, kagaya na napag-usapan natin before, like Plato, Aristotle, they just base their observation on the stars with their own eyes. But telescope enhance the view of the universe. In 1611, he became vocal to his stand on the cosmological understanding of the world and supported heliocentrism. So he was called by the church for inquisition. 1611, dahil nga pinaninindigan niya nung panahon na yon na hindi ang Earth ang sentro ng universe, but it's actually the sun, dahil doon, this is an act against the church, no? That's why the church called him out. Lesson Spotlight. This is an excerpt na letter ni Galileo Galilei sa Grand Duchess Christina ng Tuscany ng 1615 kasi si Dutch Christina ang isa sa mga taong nag-convict sa kanya na he is against the church. Itong sinabi niya. We conclude that God is known first through nature, and then again, more particularly, by doctrine. By nature in His work, and by doctrine is in His revealed word. So Galileo Galilei have faith. He believes in God. He believes that the Bible or the Word of God is the revelation of what the Word wants. And the universe and the nature is the testament. So, as you can see, hindi po lahat ng scientists, kagaya ng sinasabi ng iba ngayon na they are against or they do not believe or they do not have faith. Scientists, many scientists have faith. And one of those is Galileo Galilei. He just had to think rationally. Naging rational siya when it comes to that. Okay? Okay. So, excuse me. Okay lang po. Okay? So he stated that the Bible and nature do not disagree with one another. The Bible is the Word of God and a guide to the story on how to behave and why, while nature is God's physical work. He simply stated, science is the uncovering of God's work. So he believes that the universe and nature speaks as testament of the wonder of the Almighty. No? So naniniwala siya, pero hindi siya naniniwala sa sinasabi ng simbahan. Okay? He believes in God, but he does not believe on what the church states. Though Galileo Galilei was a faithful man, the church did not believe him. Hindi naniwala sa kanya yung simbahan. In 1616, the church banned all the studies in cosmos pertaining to heliocentrism. Deeper, next chapter after this, we will be talking about cosmological understanding on understanding about the universe. Hindi si Galileo Galilei ang unang tao na nagtalakay ng heliocentrism. Pero isa siya sa mga unang tao na he stood on his ground, no, when it comes to heliocentrism. So 1616 binan lahat ng understanding or pag-aaral tungkol sa heliocentrism. Until nung 1623, nag-publish siya ng kanyang paper called the Assayer, where he strongly stated that the scientists should be free to do their works, that God moves the heavens in many ways, so the source of ultimate truth will always be faith. In this Assayer, in this article that he created, he stated that the ultimate truth and the ultimate knowledge always comes from the Almighty, from God, from faith, no? But he also states that the universe is the uncovering and the testament of the universe. So, medyo mabigat yun. Ngayon, pangalawang attempt niya na to. Yung unang attempt niya noong 1615, pangalawang attempt niya is noong 1623. This is an excerpt from his Assayer in 1623. I say I do not wish to be counted as an ignoramus and an ingrate toward nature and toward God. For if they have given me my senses and my reason, why should I defer such great gift to the errors of some man? Why should I believe blindly and stupidly what I wish to believe and subject the freedom of my intellect to someone else who is just as liable to error as I am? He does not want to limit himself to what the humans want to speak. He does not want himself to be confined. No? Galileo Galilei is a very faithful man. But at the same time, meron siyang reasoning, meron siyang logic na sinasabi niya na hindi ko hahayaan na ang tao lang din ang makakapagpigil sa akin. Na hindi ko hahayaan na ang tao lang din ang makakapagpigil sa akin upang mag-aral, upang magsaliksik, upang hanapin ang katotohanan tungkol sa kalikasan, tungkol sa universe. No? And that's what Galileo Galilei wants, to make the church realize that the nature is actually the testament of God's work. Galilei's message opened the dialogue of the two chief systems of the cosmos in 1632. He stood for the heliocentrism, which did not match the geocentrism. Galileo Galilei, in his Assayer in 1623, madami siyang nakumbinse sa simbahan, sa politics, even the common masses realized a lot of things dahil sa ginawa niyang Assayer. Until after 11 years, nagkaroon ng open dialogue na inopen ang cardinal, ang church. And they talked about heliocentrism and geocentrism. And eventually, because of the data, because of the evidences provided by Galileo Galilei, no? Because of the data provided, the geocentrism did not match the heliocentrism. But although nanalo siya sa dialogue, the church was not happy. That's why in 1633, a year after his participation in the dialogue of the two chief systems of cosmos, the heliocentrism and geocentrism, inaresto siya in 1633, and he was house arrested for the rest of his life hanggang sa namatay siya. But, you know, habang naka-quarantine siya, kasi house arrest, he was quarantined until his death. Isolation did not stop Galileo Galilei and continued sciencing astronomy, physics, and other fields of science. Nakagawa pa siya ng libro, nakapagbasa pa siya ng madaming libro, at naka-influence pa siya ng madaming scientists during his time. He has inspired a lot of scientists kahit na naka-quarantine siya. Joke lang, house arrest, no? Pero quarantine. So, I just want to highlight, no, if you are quarantined at home, it's not entirely a bad thing. It's an opportunity for you to test other waters, to test other fields, no? Ayun lang. And just like what Galileo Galilei did, even Isaac Newton had his own experience on being locked down. Okay? So a lesson spotlight in 1638. This is his statement for the opening of the scientific method. He called for specific tests that would allow the experimenters to redo and confirm his laws by their own senses. In his words, he stated the true mark of being a true scientist is by independent confirmation. If you remember our discussion in the history of science, introduction to the history of science, the nullius in verba, meaning no one's word. That came from that quotation actually rooted from Galileo Galilei. You have to redo and to reconfirm the truth or the conclusion before you believe. Kasi hindi siya pinakinggan, di ba? So he's asking for other people to redo his experiments, to redo his observations para maniwala ka. Kung ayaw mo maniwala, why don't you do it? Why don't you conduct an experiment and prove to me? And that's what Galileo Galilei said during being quarantined or locked down. So, that's one, the first person. Again, there are three people behind scientific method. That's one. The next is Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon is born in 1561, also shares credit in the development of scientific method. He proposed that there should be a whole new approach to science, which should be practical, instrumental, supported by the state. He wanted a new replacement of understanding natural philosophy by wrapping up all the fields of natural philosophies. He also believed science should not be based on Aristotelian method of seeking knowledge, scientific knowledge, by rational argument. Instead, it should be experimentally proven. Similar with what Galileo Galilei has said, Bacon wants to change the idea of science. Because remember, until this time, science is still at its growing state. Until now, it's still growing. No? Pero it's more on argumentative, rationality. Ganun yung ginagawa nila. Reasoning. But then again, in science, there should always be an experimentation, an explanation on whatever is happening. Yun yung kulang sa science before. And that's why Francis Bacon introduced experimental proving. Kaya yung ginawa ng Royal Society, if you remember our discussion in Introduction to History of Science and Technology, ay meron silang tinatawag na peer-reviewed journal. Ibig sabihin, they would go to a certain place and then discuss their discussions, and then eventually make a paper out of it to prove and reprove the conducts of their fellow scientists. So natural philosophy should be used to improve well-being of humanity by leaving technological advances. During this time, nagkakaroon na ng merging o nagkakaroon na ng unifying concept ang techne at episteme. If you remember our discussion in engineers on lesson 4, Techne is the useful art or useful knowledge and or practical knowledge, and then episteme is logic and reasoning. So Bacon wants to join these two things, something that the common or the common good or the community can use. Francis Bacon want to understand the natural world and control it by means of techne. Dito na nagkaroon ng scientific explanations in every technology developed. Dati kasi kapag engineer ka or builder ka, architecton ka, gagawa ka lang and that's it. Now, he wants it to be scientific. He wants it to be also economical. He believed that the natural philosopher should have a first-hand experience in experimentation and test the important questions without relying on the words of the long-dead Greek and Arabic philosophers. He did not rely his science on ancient sciences, natural philosophers. Instead, he wants scientists or natural philosophers during his time to have a first-hand experience na sila yung gumawa at hindi lang sila puro reasoning and logic. Now, di ba, during the natural philosophy era, they promoted idealism, but when they introduced mathematics. But now, he introduced combining the natural philosophy on understanding on episteme and techne. He also proposed to have a Solomon's house. Ano nga ba ang Solomon's house? The world of science must have a central planning and support system, and that it should be program or system that works for the public. He wants to have a home or house. No, in 1626, he published his book, New Atlantis. Doon sa New Atlantis na yan, kasama doon ang Solomon's house, wherein the Solomon's house is a house filled with scientific people. Ang New Atlantis niya kasi, it's a utopic scientific society. So he believes that, kung maalala ninyo doon sa natural philosophers natin, Plato, before you enter his class, no one must enter that is ignorant in geometry. Ito naman, kailangan scientist ka or you are naturally a natural philosopher or scientific literate before you enter the house. But sadly, during this time, existing pa rin kasi ang gender bias. So he believes that the Solomon's house is considered to be all male. So dapat lahat ng participants doon sa lahat ng participants nila ay all male pa rin. Okay? Wherein these all males have segregated specific roles. May gampani ng bawat isa dito sa Solomon's house. The Solomon's house are divided into many classifications, no? So pag pumasok ka daw dyan and you are scientifically literate, mahahati ka, makaklassify ka base sa specialty mo. Example, the traveler. The traveler, they will travel the world and gather facts. Of course, Bacon realizes that that knowledge is not only concentrated on England or in British colony, on British Empire, but he also believes that knowledge exists in all parts of the world. So he wants to send people, magpapadala siya ng iba't ibang tao daw na maghahanap o magsasaliksik ng karunungan sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo at babalik sa Solomon's house. The second one is experimentalist. They will conduct the experiment to create new facts. So experimentalists will conduct experiments to create new concepts. The bookworm will read. Of course, they will read existing knowledge and extrapolate this knowledge and submit it to the experimentalist, tapos itetest nila kung totoo ba o hindi. Of course, there are also the analyzers. All results of the experiment will be submitted to them and will be analyzed. Lahat ng resulta ng experiment. Example, you are a traveler. Okay? When you return, you report that to the analyzer, yung knowledge na nakuha mo. Experimentalist and bookworm work together in order to create this new knowledge. Once they create this new knowledge, they will submit this to the analyzer to analyze it. After the analyzer is done analyzing the new knowledge or the newly acquired knowledge, ito naman ay ipapasa niya dito sa interpreters of nature. Ang interpreters of nature ay tatlo lang sila. Tatlo lang daw dapat sila. Composed of 3 men who will take all the facts and use them to produce axioms or new truth. Accepted axioms. And then, yung interpreters of nature, yung na-develop nilang axioms, new truth, they will submit this knowledge to the benefactors. The benefactors are the rich people who will buy the knowledge and develop technique and use it. This is the dowry men. No? They will use the new axioms to develop a new technique, to practice new technique. Diba? That is something relevant to the society and relevant to the community, which is actually good. And this is the structure of the Solomon's house. Kung titingnan ninyo, okay, this is the structure of the Solomon's house. Si traveler, experimentalist, at bookworm, they will seek knowledge. Ipapasa nila yan kay analyzer. Pag nabasa or naayos na ng mga analyzers, ibibigay nila yan sa interpreters of nature. Ngayon, yung tatlong interpreters of nature, they will create new axioms. Pag sinabing new axioms, new form of knowledge. New episteme. Ngayon, yung new episteme na yan, makikipag-work together sila with the benefactors to create techne. Bakit kailangan ng benefactors sa techne? It requires money to create technology. Hindi ganun kadali, di ba? Magtayo ng company, tech company, because you really need a lot of money. That's why they need benefactors. And that is the composition of his Solomon's house. Again, the Solomon's house is just a dream for Bacon, Francis Bacon. Sinulat niya ito, nilagay niya sa kanyang libro na New Atlantis. At pinapakita niya talaga doon kung ano yung gusto niya at pangarap niya para sa scientific community. But sadly, there is still gender bias during that time. The third person to be known as one of the contributors of the scientific method is Descartes, René Descartes, born in the central France in 1596, but he lived most of his time in Netherlands. He is known as one of the founding figures of modern mathematics and algebra, modern mathematics, modern philosophy, and bridge geometry and algebra. This allowed him to develop the Cartesian coordinates, of course, the Cartesian plane. Having heard of what happened of Galileo Galilei in 1633, of being house arrested, he stopped publishing his own book supporting heliocentrism called Le Monde, or The World. He did not come up of a new cosmological idea based on heliocentrism, which figured a chaotic, moving ethereal fluid where the planets and the stars are suspended instead of spheres. Okay. René Descartes is a very well-known mathematician. He developed the Cartesian plane. He is one of the known mathematicians when it comes to geometry, to algebra. And he also supported heliocentrism. Kaso nga, noong 1633, nung nabalitaan niyang inaresto si Galileo Galilei, tinigil niya yung pagpapublish ng libro niya na Le Monde or The World, wherein he also believes in heliocentrism. Okay? But not in orbital way, no? But he believes that the Earth and the stars are floating in the universe. In 1637, Descartes published his book called Discourse on the Method. The Discourse on the Method was his major contribution in the history of scientific knowledge. He started from the very beginning with a very abstract question. How do we know what we know? Paano mo malalaman kung ano yung alam mo? This question became the core of philosophy of epistemology. And until today, philosophers still debates on Descartes' question on the origin of knowledge. Descartes wanted to challenge the king of philosophy, Aristotle, and his attack on him boils down to his two major arguments. Okay, how do you know what? How do we know what we know? How do we know what we know is a quotation that scientists usually say kasi it's very humbling. It allows you to limit yourself, to identify your limitations as a scientist. And ito yung dalawa niyang arguments. Two major arguments of Descartes. First one, knowledge is obtained through the senses, which lacks about absolute certainty because the senses often deceive us. Totoo naman. Human reason can also be deceived. Logical conclusion from false premises will lead to wrong answers. He believes that everything is prone to error. Everything is prone to logical lapses. Kasi nga, marami pa tayong hindi alam. He used mathematics and only mathematics as a way towards proof in order to explain the natural world. He used systematic doubting, method simply doubting yourself on what you really know. Systematic doubting. Para yang nag-compute ka, tama ba ginawa ko? Tama ba ginawa ko? Ibig sabihin, you're not being cynical, no? But you are being skeptic if what you did is right or what you did is wrong. And you doubt it. And it's okay. When you're in the field of science, it's okay to doubt. It's okay to question. Because questioning is always the piety of thought. So, the systematic doubting, sample nga, nag-compute ka, you question it. Tatanungin mo pa kung tama ba yung ginawa mo and you're going back to your computations. So, the scientific method was born and the founding members of the Royal Society pointed Galileo Galilei, Francis Bacon, and René Descartes as the great thinkers who contributed in scientific way of understanding the natural world. Galileo Galilei is an experimentalist. He focused on the independent rationality and comparison on the theories about the natural world. Si Francis Bacon naman ay practical thinker. He focused on the experimentation and social norms in promoting scientific research. While René Descartes is a pure philosopher who promoted always asking yourself, how sure are you on what you know? So those are three important characteristics of scientific method. You should be an experimentalist, you should be a practical thinker, and you should also be a pure philosopher. Joining these three, sorry. Tawa ko dun. Sorry, pumiyok po. Joining these three allow you to have the idea of scientific method and be scientifically enough in answering questions. So you should be experimentalist, practical thinker, and pure philosopher. Scientists were not called scientists until 1840. If you remember our discussion in Introduction to Science, History of Science and Technology, it was coined by William Whewell, an English scientist who also served as a historian and priest. There were many scientists that contributed a lot in the scientific body of knowledge. So, before 1840, ang tawag sa mga scientists ay natural philosophers or alchemists. But then again, alchemists died out, but did not entirely died out because it lives with chemistry. Let's talk about Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton is one of the mostly known scientists. He's an icon during his time. Born in 1643, an English scientific titan until today. He's very known. He focused his work on the universal gravitation. He also worked on three laws of motion, which became the foundation of modern physics. He also discovered calculus. So kung may sisisihin man po kayo kung bakit mahirap ang calculus, dahil po sa kanya. Also allowed him to have a powerful method to solve complicated mathematical problems. Sir Isaac Newton have actually broken several concepts or several perceptions about mathematics and physics developed during the ancient Greeks on the following years. He broke a lot of it. That's why he became one of the first presidents of the Royal Society. Kaya kilalang kilala talaga si Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton was also quarantined, locked down because of a pandemic during their time. At nakagawa siya ng mga paper niya, nakagawa siya ng libro, nakagawa siya ng theory niya. Malay nyo, diba? So calculus, no, is a mathematics that describes how a thing changes instantaneously, whether that thing is velocity, acceleration, displacement, height, weight, volume, or other variables. That's how important calculus is, even though mahirap siya. Noong 1600s was the century of science in London. Doon umusbong ang mga kilalang scientists sa London. Pero sa Paris, in 1700s, came the called Enlightenment. Enlightenment became massive shift from the ideas about the world, away from the traditional sources of authority like the church. This was a century of leaning towards scientific rational knowledge as described by Bacon. One must dare to know. Sorry, I'm quite feeling well. Hindi po ito COVID, may ano po, hindi po to dry cough. No? This became the rise of new ideologies and philosophies. The individual liberty, progressive civilization, religious tolerance, and separation of church and state. These ideas were developed and enriched by the French philosophers. The strength or the power of the church was very powerful during that time. During the time of in the 1600s, 1500s, 1400s, starting from around 1100s, the papal power was really powerful during that time. And they should not be questioned. Kaya nga kahit si Galileo Galilei na nakulong at madaming scientists ang nakulong because the church is very, very powerful and they are really respected by the community. The papal power is respected mostly all over the world. But during the Enlightenment in the 1700s, this was called the Enlightenment. Ibig sabihin, nagkaroon na ng separation of church and state. They're asking that it should be a separation. If you remember our discussion about chemistry, alchemy, diyan nahati ang alchemy. Diyan namatay ang alchemy. Diyan siya nag-decide kung magiging religion ba ito o magiging science ba ito. Madami pong nangyari during this time. The height of rationality, the height of reasoning during their time was very high in 1700s. In 18th century, it was regarded that physics was already on its way to rationalization, quantification, and standard measurement. But what about chemistry? In 18th century, the 1700s, 18th century, established na ang physics. Known na ang physical sciences na physics. Pero kumusta naman ang chemistry? Chemistry came from the natural philosophy of alchemy, and in 1700s, the alchemy is beginning to die out. At its last year, natural philosophers believed that chemical reactions are possible because of an ether, a colorless, odorless, self-repulsive, extremely fine, and hard-to-measure fluid called the phlogistones. Now, this phlogiston theory is a concept wherein ether was released as a product of combustion. So, ang isa sa mga tao, isa sa mga natural philosophers, French nobleman, chemist na nag-deal dito, na tinalakay ito. Kasi physics icons are already there. Nandyan na si Nandyan na si Isaac Newton. Don't get me wrong, these people also practices chemistry, but they are mostly on physics. Chemistry, medyo konti lang po talaga sila, no? And one of these few is this person, Antoine Laurent Lavoisier. Okay? Iba-iba po ng pronunciation. Meron pong Antoine Laurent de Lavoisier, Lavoisier. Bahala kayo kung anong gusto yung tawag. Okay? Ganun po yung pronunciation ng iba't ibang. Iba-iba kasi teacher ko before, ang basa nila dyan, Lavoisier, Lavoisier. It's up to you. Antoine Lavoisier is one of the scientists who actually dealt and reintroduced modern chemistry. Kasi from alchemy, transition to chemistry, it's very tough. So, isa siya sa mga nag-introduce ng modern chemistry. So, he's born in 1743, worked on understanding chemical reactions of combustion. There, he was also able to understand the phlogisticated air was oxygen and the dephlogisticated air was carbon dioxide. He's also the first person, he was also able to develop the law of conservation of mass. I know that you have already heard it, that mass can neither be destroyed nor created, it can only be transformed, just like energy. And in a chemical reaction, di ba, chemistry class ninyo, pag may nag-combine, nag-associate, nag-dissociate, nag-decompose, the mass must always be equal. Diyan po nanggaling yung balancing reactions. He also published his first list of elements. And trust me, yung elements niya, sobrang iksi lang kaysa sa elements na meron tayo ngayon. He also established the states of matter, wherein there is, tinignan niya kasi ang water. Since he was able to identify oxygen, tinignan niya ang water na merong solid pag naka-ice, merong liquid pag naka-tubig, naka-liquid form, and merong steam, gas kapag naka-steam, kapag nag-evaporate. So, dito niya nakuha yung law of conservation of mass, na kahit maging in a physical transformation or physical change from solid, liquid to gas, the mass of water will always be the same. Doon niya nakuha yung law of conservation of mass because of his understanding on the states of matter. He became rational experimentalist. He also became a sign of overturning of one of the oldest natural philosophy, the alchemy, and the birth of chemistry. Antoine Lavoisier became the father of modern chemistry in 1777. Kaya siya kinilalang father of modern chemistry, kagaya ng sinabi ko sa inyo before. In the 18th century, alchemy died out. And si Antoine Lavoisier ang isa sa mga taong nagpakilala nito because he separated religion from chemistry, alchemy to chemistry because of his rational experimentation. But then again, Antoine Lavoisier is also rich, mayaman, oligarch, mataas ang antas sa lipunan. Kaya, unfortunately, during the French Revolution, he was branded as a traitor because he was involved in taxation, supported foreign scientists. He was one of the many noblemen who were killed despite being a great contributor to the body of knowledge. Lavoisier died by the guillotine in 1794. Ayan po. Yan po yung guillotine, yung hihiga or gaganon ka. Tapos may hole doon kung saan ipapasok yung ulo mo and then babagsak yung blade. So he died in a guillotine blade even though he's one of the richest in France kasi their family is really powerful. He is a great contributor of science pero ganun talaga, nakakalungkot kahit gaano ka kagaling, gaano ka kahusay, iba pa rin yung nakikita ng tao sa iyo. Ang sabi sa kanya nung judge sa trial, the republic needs neither scientists nor chemists. The course of justice cannot be delayed. So he was killed because of in the guillotine blade. Nakakalungkot. no? Tatay ko pa naman yan. I mean, I'm a chemist, so um, he's the father of modern chemistry. So it's really a big leap in understanding modern chemistry today. Yeah. Sabi ng kaibigan niya, mathematician na friend niya, si Joseph Louis Lagrange, sorry. Joseph Louis Lagrange, his friend, the mathematician death, it took them only an instant to cut his head off, but France may not produce another head in a century. So during this time, he believes that his death, no, is actually a great loss not in France, to France. Sobrang laking kawalan na sa France kasi he's also a benefactor of a lot of scientists in France and other countries. So nakakalungkot lang na nangyari yon. So I hope, no, mahalaga po talaga ang decisions ng mga politicians when you deal with doctors, when you deal with scientists, because these scientists contributes a lot to the field of knowledge to the country. Pero nakakaligtaan ng mga people in power, ng mga nakaupong politicians, nakaupo sa upuan, sa trono, no, na these people are also important, especially if people are of value, of knowledge. Okay, so yan. So there's a lot of scientists. There's a lot of scientists that I cannot discuss to you in detail, no, but I will be discussing to you some of the scientists that I really find very important in our discussion. I want to introduce to you to Madame Marie Sklodowska-Curie. Madame Marie Sklodowska-Curie. She is a Polish and naturalized French physicist and chemist. She was born in 1867. First, she's a woman. And a woman in science is actually very difficult. Mahirap pasukin ang sciences kapag babae ka. Until today, no, but mas lalo dati. And this woman, Madame Marie Curie, is one of the greatest women of history that I know in the science and technology. If not, she's the best in science and technology when you talk about women in science. Siya ang unang babae na nanalo ng Nobel Prize. Siya ang unang tao, naunahan niya pa lahat ng lalaki sa batch niya, na manalo ng 2 Nobel Prize. Meron siyang Nobel Prize in Chemistry and Nobel Prize in Physics. She is also the only woman and the only 4 people to win 2 different fields and remains only a person. Ayun, 4 lang sila na nanalo, tapos siya nag-iisang babae pa rin na nanalo ng 2 beses and remains as the only person ever in Nobel Prizes in multiple natural sciences. Kasi chemistry and physics, magkaiba yun. See? During Marie Curie's early years in Poland, Russia outlawed laboratory sciences in schools. So there's a Russian war kasi. Ang Poland kasi is a center for Germany and Germany and Russia. Parang pinag-aagawan itong territory na to ng mga other European countries. So when Russia reinstated that, they outlawed laboratory sciences. Tapos, meron pang University of Warsaw. And sa University of Warsaw, hindi sila tumatanggap ng babae. So she went to a secret school called the Flying University. The Flying University is not flying, hindi ito lumilipad, no? But it exists. It existed before. So you had to stay there. But then again, Madame Marie Curie had to leave and went to France. In 1891, she went to Paris and pursued her studies and graduated school, and she met Pierre Curie. A French physicist, later on fell in love for the love of science. May movie sila. I will plug it after I post it. Their movie is called Radioactive, and I will ask you to do something with it later on. Madame Marie Curie is a Polish. She went to France, nag-aral siya doon, and she also met a fellow scientist, a physicist, and a chemist. Also is more the physicist, is Sir Pierre Curie, Sir Pierre Curie. So nagkakilala sila. Kaso kasi ito si Marie Curie, very powerful ang kanyang tawag doon, personality. So nakailang propose po si Pierre Curie sa kanya. So this is just an imagination again. This is this is not exactly what they said, but this is the point of what they said. Pierre Curie said, asked Marie Curie, will you marry me? Ang sabi naman ni Marie Curie, you know I'm not a French and I have to go back to Poland, and Poland has been a war zone for Russia and Germany, and I'm going back there and tell them, don't tell me you're going to leave this beautiful place. Parang sabi mo, huwag mo sabihin na iiwan mo ang Paris para lang sa akin. Sabi ni Pierre Curie, anything for you, my love. Even leaving La Belle Époque Paris. Ang sabi niya, I'll think about it. I'll get back to you on that. So, nagkahiwalay sila for a while. Lumipad si Marie Curie pabalik sa Poland. Pero, sa University of Krakow, there's no professorship for women. Pwede ka magturo, instructor, pero lecturer, pero hindi ka pwede maging professor, full professor sa Krakow. Kasi, babae siya. So, she went back to Paris and took her PhD. And then, si Pierre kasi nagpi-PhD pa lang din noon, nagdo-doctorate. So, tinanong niya, si Pierre, are you done with your PhD? Ang sabi naman ni Pierre, not yet. It's hard to get. It's hard to get PhD just like you. Hirap mong kunin. I'm sure you'll get that. So, in 1895, March 1895, gumraduate si Pierre Curie ng PhD niya. At July 18, 1925, kinasal silang dalawa. So, kudos to Pierre Curie. Biruin mo, natapos niya yung PhD niya ng March, napakasalan niya yung babaeng mahal niya ng July 1895. So, it's hitting two birds with hitting two stones. Sorry, that's supposed to be hitting two birds in 1 year. No, that's hitting two birds in 1 year. So, galing. They are really, really passionate with each other. But then again, hindi ko pinag-usapan ng nila love life, no? We're here to talk about their contribution to science and technology. Ano ko lang to? Segue. Yan. So Marie Curie heard about the work of Roentgen and Becquerel. So Becquerel and Roentgen worked with radiation, basing her understanding on electromagnetism. She used a sensitive electrometer developed by Pierre Curie in order to measure the electric charges to test how ray-producing uranium affected electromagnetic fields. Okay. So, si Marie Curie, narinig niya ang mga works ni Roentgen at ni Becquerel, who are both working on reactive materials, radiations, and she used the invention of her husband. Meron kasing ginawa si Pierre Curie na electrometer. So ginamit niya yung electrometer na yon and to understand certain concepts on radiation. And of course, Marie developed the theory of reactivity, which became a fundamental for modern physics. She revolutionized the long-standing belief developed by Democritus that atom is a single unit of matter that cannot be divided. And because of what Madame Marie Curie did, atoms can be divided, but not chemically using nuclear reactions. She proved that atoms can be divided, and also she studied the isotopes of an atom, dwelling on subparticles of atom. She did not only deal with atoms, she also dealt with protons, electrons, and neutrons, and eventually discovered 3 elements: thorium, polonium, radium. Diba? Hakot Award. In 1903, Pierre Curie, Marie Curie, and Becquerel won the Nobel Prize in Physics. She and her husband applied her theory in using radioactive materials in curing diseases like cancer, helping advancement of medical sciences. Both their works really helped in dealing with diseases. Nakakatuwa yung story ng life ni Miss Madame Curie. At the same time, nakakalungkot kasi madaming challenges, lalo na isa siyang babae. And at the same time, she's a mother. She does the households. She's a mother and she's a scientist. She's a working mother. And it's a tough job for her. At ang mas mabigat pa doon, 1906, namatay si Pierre Curie. Nawalan siya ng karamay sa anak nila. They both have two daughters. Marie Curie died in 1934 due to cancer. Yan, kaka-radioactive materials niya. So sa mga nag-NDP, sa mga material chemists dealing with reactive materials, be careful lang din sa pag-handle because due to exposure of Madame Marie Curie to radioactive materials, she had cancer. In 1995, her remains were buried in the pantheon for her achievements. There are only 3 people buried in the pantheon, and Madame Marie Curie is one of those. So the family of Marie and Pierre was one of the greatest family in the history of science kasi lahat ng miyembro ng hindi naman lahat, pero madaming miyembro ng pamilya nila ay nagkaroon ng Nobel Prize. Si Pierre ay merong Nobel Prize in Physics. Si Marie Curie merong Nobel Prize in Physics and Chemistry. At yung anak nila, si Irene Joliot Curie, also won a Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Yung isa nilang anak, si Joy Curie, ay naging magaling at kilalang writer nung panahon niya. Their family is a good depiction of how science works in the family. That it actually helps each family to help the community. Actually, Madame Marie Curie, alam mo kung anong ginawa niya sa kanyang 2 Nobel Prize medals? During the World War, binenta niya ang kanyang 2 medal para magkaroon ng ambulance para magamit sa World War. At gumamit siya ng mga radioactive materials para manggamot. That's how she helped. And that's a proof of how science can actually be used to help the community. Actually, ayaw pa nga tanggapin nung buyer yung medal kasi it's an honor to the country. It's an honor to Madame Marie. But she did it anyway to save the country, to help the country. That's why she became very, very well known in the field of science and technology, not only in their country, but the entire world. Okay? So, Marie's work on radioactive materials with other radioactive nuclear scientists like Ernest Rutherford, the father of nuclear science, allowed the possibility of alchemy's opted to the principle of transmutation, the principle of turning anything into gold, into a new material, just like turning any base metals into gold. If you remember our discussions sa alchemists, ang gusto ng mga alchemists, yung concept ng transmutation, turning a material into a new material. But it is impossible, chemically impossible. But because of what Madame Marie Curie did, what she and her husband did, what Becquerel, Rutherford, Roentgen did, it's possible. It's possible to turn anything into gold, turn metals into gold. But today, the possibility of turning base metals to gold would be more expensive than gold itself. Kasi ang ini-imagine ng alchemist ganito, nandito sa picture na to. Ganyan lang ang pag-transform ng gold. Pero ang totoo, to transform a certain material, ayan yung tao, it requires you an entire nuclear reactor in order for you to transform a certain material. But it's not yet proven. But it's possible. No? See? So this opened doors to a lot of fields of science. Physics is regarded as one of the core disciplines of natural philosophy or natural science. Nandiyan si biology, chemistry, physics, earth science. In 1900s, it was considered as an almost complete science. Almost complete na siya. Pero, ang last puzzle piece ay nakay Albert Einstein. Sorry. This should be Albert Einstein nasa taas. I cannot edit it now. Albert Einstein, born in 1897, is a German theoretical physicist who became the pillar of modern physics. In 1905, it was an annus mirabilis for Albert Einstein, meaning it was a marvelous year for him. 1905, he is a clerk patent. He's a clerk in a patent office. At nullius in verba, meaning, annus mirabilis, ibig sabihin, marvelous or miraculous year for him. Why? He was able to publish 4 papers, 4 different, not entirely related papers, scientific papers, in 1905. Parang every other month, meron siyang napapublish na paper na hindi ganun kadali. At yung 4 na paper na yon ay nag-provide ng mataas o malaking impact sa science and technology that they had before and we have today. The 4 are the Brownian motion. The Brownian motion wherein the pollens are placed in a fluid, no, and then you drop pollens, and this Brownian motion have actually proven the existence of atoms. Photoelectric effect, supporting the idea that energy a series of particles, not a wave. Equivalence of mass and energy. E is equals to mc squared. I'm sure nakikita nyo to. That energy is equals to mass times speed of light squared. mc squared. And that, ibig sabihin, ang mass ay pwede mong i-transform into energy. And of course, the special relative. Nothing can move faster than light, speed of light. It was about comparing physical effects from different observer, position in terms of velocity or speed in a particular direction. So, mass and energy are both but different manifestation of same thing, of somewhat unfamiliar concepts of the average mind. Einstein on E is equal to mc squared. E is equal to energy, m is equal to mass, c is speed of light. And that E is equated, energy is equated with mass and speed of light squared. So in 1915, he publishes another paper in Theory of General Relativity, which explains physics of all situations. It was confirmed further and accepted by the scientific community in 1919, which made him an icon of science during that time until today. Albert Einstein is a titan, kagaya ni Isaac Newton. But kung si Isaac Newton, madami siyang na-break na concepts in physics ni Plato and Aristotle, ganun din si Albert Einstein. He broke some of the works of Isaac Newton. But his road as a father of modern physics also became very controversial, since there are a lot of scientists who are also dealing with modern physics, kagaya ni Ernest Rutherford, ni Niels Bohr. They theorized the model of atom, which shows the electrons moves around the heavy nucleus of the atom, and that each electrons are suspended in energy level, which could be in ground state or excited state. Both scientists studied physics of the very small particles. So what did I just say? That is the introduction to the new phase of understanding natural philosophy during that time, natural sciences during that time. Kasi 1905 publish ni Albert Einstein yung Brownian motion. 1907, na-prove ang existence ng atom dahil kila Boltzmann, dahil sa mga iba't ibang scientists. 1907, lalo na palalim. 1907, pinapakilala na meron ng atom. Kasi dati theory lang. Until today, theory pa rin naman. Pero mas napapakilala na siya na merong atom. 1907. Pero 1909, nakita agad na merong electrons. Si J.J. Thomson. Until such, Ernest Rutherford Niels Bohr also worked with smaller particles in 1911. So, naging mabilis yung pagkasabi na merong atom, naging mabilis yung movement ng science nung pumasok ang 20th century, ang 1900s. Bumilis ang takbo ng science. 1920s, the controversy of understanding subatomic particles became more controversial, which involved more particle scientists in the picture. Dumami yung mga particle scientists. And one of these is in 1926, two German physicists who worked on the math on quantum mechanics. The first one is Werner Heisenberg, who invented the matrix mechanics and the theory of uncertainty principle, and states that any observer can detect the position and the velocity of a quantum particle at any given time interval, but not both at the same time. And then the other one is Erwin Schrödinger, who studied the wave mechanics. He used the mathematical equation to describe finding electrons in a certain position. So just give you a heads up, this is not a technical science subject. No need to memorize this, no. Pero I just want you to realize the importance of their contributions, like Werner Heisenberg matrix mechanics. I'm sure you are familiar with that. I'm not sure, but I think kasi you guys are working in an electronics company. And then the next one is Erwin Schrödinger. Erwin Schrödinger is working on wave mechanics. Pareha silang German who are working on particle chemistry or particle sciences. Pero naging matindi ang labanan nila. Kasi ganito nangyari dyan. Kwento ko lang. This is true story. Si Werner Heisenberg kumampi kay Niels Bohr. Si Niels Bohr, Rutherford, tsaka si Werner Heisenberg magkakakampi. Si Erwin Schrödinger kumampi kay Albert Einstein kasama yung lahat. Kasi syempre, lahat kumampi kay Einstein kasi siya yung icon during that time. So it's a very, very controversial event. Kasi dahil sa challenge na at there was a time when Werner Heisenberg actually went to one of the lectures of Schrödinger. Tapos, after mag-lecture ni Schrödinger, sinabi ni Heisenberg yung mga mali sa tinuro niya, kaharap ng mga estudyante niya. So, it's very challenging. It's very challenging. No, very challenging. So, because of that, 1926, napunta na sa, because of the challenges, because of the debates happening between the group of Einstein and the group of Niels Bohr on the state of the modern quantum physics, dumating yung Solvay Conference. Solvay Conference in 1927, this became the birth of quantum mechanics. As you can see here at the screen, there are a lot of scientists that all of them, I think dalawa lang ang walang Nobel Prize sa kanila. And what do you notice in the picture? What do you notice in the picture? Nag-iisa lang si Madame Marie Curie. Yan siya. Si Madame Marie Curie. So, this is Albert Einstein. This is Madame Marie Curie. This is Niels Bohr. This is Heisenberg. This is Schrödinger. Okay. Yan, sila yung mga tao. Schrödinger, Erwin Schrödinger, Werner Heisenberg, Niels Bohr, Albert Einstein, Madame Marie Curie. And then the others as well. Hindi ko na sila mamukhaan isa-isa. Ayun. So, nagpunta na 1927, nagtipon sila sa isang conference, no? Not sa isang conference somewhere in Berlin. Nagtipon sila, and then nung nagtipon sila, they discussed. Doon, nakikinig yung ibang nuclear physicists, lahat ng physicists na nandiyan, habang nakikinig sa pag-uusap ni Bohr and Niels Bohr and Einstein. And sino sa tingin ninyo ang nanalo? Ano bang pinagtatalunan nila una? Ang pinagtatalunan nila yung state ng atom, state ng electrons, no? And ang nanalo in this debate is Niels Bohr. Okay? But this did not break Albert Einstein's stand. No? This did not break him. This actually also helped him to be a better scientist in the future, kagaya ni Niels Bohr. And it's a friendly debate. Hindi yun away kagaya nung nangyari kay Heisenberg tsaka kay Schrödinger. Kasi si Heisenberg tsaka si Schrödinger, nagkainitan talaga sila. Pero between Bohr and Einstein, siguro nagkainitan, pero na-settled naman. And because of them, kaya ang hirap ng mga subject ngayon. Because of them, quantum mechanics was born. Okay. So as I have mentioned, there are a lot of scientists who have contributed a lot in the field of science, no, in the society. I cannot discuss them all to you, but I hope you appreciate their lives. That they sacrifice their lives to contribute to the existing body of knowledge that we have. Nilaan nila yung buong buhay nila para mag-aral, para lang makakontribute sa atin. Here are some of them. No? So we have Albert Einstein, and I have here Madame Marie Curie. We have Ernest Rutherford, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Schrödinger. Yan. Lahat sila may issues sa life nila na controversial sila. Like Schrödinger, babaero. Einstein, may mga issues din. May mga issues sila. But they're not perfect. They're only scientists. They're also humans. But their intentions on trying to help the society, on trying to help the community is very pure. So these are actually some of my favorite scientists. That's why I know them. Friend ko sa FB. Sorry, joke lang. So I know them. And they are really, really, really good. No? So there are many scientists who contributed to the body of knowledge all throughout the history across the world. Hindi ko na kayang i-discuss mula sa iba't ibang panig. There are scientists in Japan, China, Korea, Philippines. You know, we will go there. Scientists in America, scientists in Africa, no, the continent. There are a lot of scientists across the world, all throughout the history and across the world, and they want to share something. Scientists today seeks knowledge and aims to contribute to the large pool of a body of knowledge through research and experimentation. The history of science is not about the people, it's about how the people of science viewed the world during their time and how they sought knowledge. If you notice, the scientists think differently during their time. It's not about them. It's about their contribution. So, all throughout the history, these scientists have actually contributed a lot. But one thing's for sure, science is not a one-man team. Hindi binuhos ang karunungan sa isang tao lang. Ito ay kinalat sa history ng scientists. It is a contribution of different people from different times, different fields, in order to understand and explain the natural and the modern world, material world. But kung babalikan natin ang introduction to history of science and technology, this is the perpetual question na tinatanong pa rin ng mga scientists. At tinanong ito ng mga alchemists, tinanong ito ng mga natural philosophers, ng mga architects, engineers. Until today, tinatanong pa rin ito ng mga scientists and engineers today. What is matter? What is matter? What is matter? Sagutin mo, matter is anything. Matter is made up of atoms, building blocks of atoms. What are atoms made of? Atoms are made up of protons, electrons, and neutrons. What are these made of? Protons and electrons and neutrons, subatomic particles. They are made of leptons. What are leptons made of? Quarks and leptons. Diba? So, inaaral pa rin. Where are we? We are the center of the universe. Kasi tayo ang gitna ng universe. Tapos dumating yung heliocentrism, hindi, ang sun ang center of the universe. Pero tanong, ang sun nga ba talaga? Hindi lang naman solar system ang pinag-uusapan. When are we? What is life? The hows and whys of the universe is being continually asked. And today, the pen is in our hands to write the continuation of the history of science and technology. Ngayon, sa araw na ito, sa panahong ito, the history of science and technology continues to be written. Sinusulat ito. And eventually, in the future, this will be part of the history. Hopefully, no, our scientists will be granted wisdom para malaman nila kung ano yung gamot sa pandemyang hinaharap natin at matapos ang pandemyang ito. Of course, by the grace and the wisdom that will be given to them by the Almighty. Why study the history of science and technology? Learning the history of science and technology can help us shine a light on this dark future. That is from Hank Green in 2018. So, class, guys, I hope, no, sa pagtalakay natin ng kasaysayan ng agham at teknolohiya, sana hindi matapos dito. Learning history of science and technology is not memorizing it. It's not recognizing it. It's learning from it para hindi natin ulitin yung pagkakamali na ginagawa ng mga tao before. Diba? And I think that's the end of chapter 1. Thank you very much. No, we already discussed about introduction to history of science and technology, the alchemists, the engineers, the natural philosophers, the engineers, and the scientists. So we already discussed about them. I hope you learned a lot. Please be informed that there will be a chapter test for your activity. So starting from unang chapter, unang lesson 1 to 5, no, I will be giving an activity for the scientists, and then I will also be giving an exam for exam 1 the following meeting. So this is our 3rd session. So on our 4th session, I will be giving an exam. Okay, but likewise, I will also be uploading another video lecture. So, should you have any questions, clarifications, addition, subtraction on my lecture, please feel free to comment on the comment section. Ilang po. Thank you and may God be with you all. Maraming salamat po.